Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm Louise. I'm the founder of Métissage Sangue Misto, a web mag and safe space community dedicated to the world of mixed people of any combination. And it aims to help us build our confidence, make friends, and create a positive impact in the world. Today we are live with hand us over the mic. I choose this name because there is a great story on it, but I will tell you another time about that. Anyway, in this space, we have featured guests that they come to discuss a variety of top-ranging topics, from identity, belonging, all aspects of being creatively mixed. And this, I like to create this simply because I would like to give some inspiration and a sort of wisdom, let us say, to the mixed people that are usually unrepresented. So let's go just straight to the point, and let us welcome our illuminating guest today. He's a special guest for me. I'm so honored and profoundly grateful to hand over our mic to Dr. REMI ADEKOYA. Hello, Remy. How are you?
Hi, I'm fine, and thanks for having me.
Yeah, no, I thank you really, because it's a great goal for me to have you here today. So your small bio, let me hand you the mic. Just tell us a little bit about your bio.
Yeah, so I was born in Nigeria, in Abeokuta, Nigeria, to a Nigerian father and Polish mother. I grew up in Lagos. I went to a primary and secondary school in Lagos. So I spent the first 17 years of my life really in Nigeria. And then after that, I moved to my mother's homeland, Poland, Warsaw, Poland, where I went to university and where I lived for 19 years before finally in 2015 moving to the UK. So I now live in Sheffield in the UK. I've been here since 2015. So that's pretty much in a nutshell, sort of the places I've lived in. And so I've had the mixed race experience, in Nigeria.
Yeah.
So where I was sort of, the lighter skinned one, sort of, so from that angle, so a majority Black society, a monoracial society, really, overwhelmingly a Black society. And then I moved to Poland, where I had the mixed race experience in an overwhelmingly white society. And now I live in the UK, which is really definitely the most multicultural and multiracial society I've ever lived in. And so there's clear differences I've seen in, the mixed race experience, here compared to both Poland and Nigeria. And so if it comes to, where I work now, I lecture politics at the University of York.
Yeah.
And I also had a career in political journalism before I went into academia. So that's what I do now.
Yeah, in fact, I wanted to introduce you even in your profession, let's say, because I believe it's a type of profession that give you the opportunity to see also these topics in a different perspective way. So it's very good. You told us about that. And I just want to tell to our followers here that above all these your stunning curricula, because it's really stunning. I think you studied law too.
I did, yes. I studied law in Poland, University of Warsaw, but I never really enjoyed it, to be honest. And so I finished the degree, just to keep my parents happy. We know what it means, those of us from Nigeria, what it means for your parents that you must finish university, and and they want you to finish a big degree. So,
and not only a big degree, even if it can be double, triple,
exactly.
You should put everything inside, because
exactly.
It's very important.
So I did that, but it was never really for me, to be honest. And so then I went into political journalism in Poland.
Yeah.
So I had that interesting experience, definitely, of working as a someone seen as black, because in Poland, that mixed race idea doesn't even really function there at all.
Yeah.
So definitely someone seen basically as black, as from Africa, working as a journalist there in Polish journalism. So that was definitely an interesting experience also.
Well, I think it's a bit dangerous also, because at least in places like Nigeria, to be a journalist nowadays, isn't it?
No, definitely. That's for, for all sorts of, political reasons and all that. But I can't say it was dangerous to be a black journalist in Poland. No, it wasn't. I mean, you face all sorts of challenges.
Yeah.
But physical danger is not one of them.
Okay. No, because sometimes I hear about some Nigerian politics some Nigerian journalists that are, they have to be very careful what they say.
Oh, of course.
Anyway.
Or in Nigeria, definitely. The powers that be are really oppressive.
Yeah. It's not like in Italy that you can say anything you want, and it's only confusion, because we love confusion.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the most people will insult you on social media, and that's it.
that is the great sport nowadays, because that is it. So I just wanted to tell our followers here that what personally and finally brought me to you, it was your book, because you wrote a very, I find it fascinating and illuminating for the mixed people. The title is Biracial Britain, a different way of looking at race. But anyway, we will get into that deeply in a while. Surely, I am curious about this, because you said you got married with a Nigerian lady. And I was interested also, it's, let us say it's an interracial couple, a way to be an interracial couple, different type, not black, white, Asian, black, it's mixed with, go on, with who?
With my wife is from Edo State in Nigeria, so she's 100% Nigerian, as we would say. And so the way we met was in 2013. I lived in Warsaw then, but I used to write articles for The Guardian, for the UK Guardian.
Yeah.
And so I wrote an article on President Goodluck Jonathan at the time, sort of assessing, his 3 years, I think it was, in office. And then usually what I always used to do is, when I'd write an article, I always used to look through the comments section, and engage with the readers, commenting on the article. And I started engaging with, this person who I didn't know if it was a male or a female. Just had a nick there, commenting on the article. But I enjoyed the engagement. There was a bit of back and forth. This is what I thought about the article, etc. Then, after a while, I sort of figured out this was a female. But there was no picture there or anything, but I sort of figured out this was a female. And then we said, we really enjoyed the interaction in the comment section of The Guardian. And then we said, well, why don't we friend each other on Facebook? And then, we friend each other on Facebook, and then I saw how she looked, pictures and everything. And then we started chatting, through Facebook and Facebook Messenger. And at the time, there was something called Yahoo Messenger, which we used to sort of exchange chat with every day. And then we started calling each other. I found out then she lived in Lagos. And then we started calling each other. And this lasted for a couple of months until finally I went to Lagos to meet her, and we met in person. And, sometimes these, sort of online things, you can meet somebody online and, things work fine online. But then when you meet in real life, it's not the same. There's something not there. In our case, we were lucky that it was there also when we met physically. And that's how our relationship started, really. And then, so during that period, 2013, 2014, I was shuttling back and forth between Warsaw and Lagos. I'd be a couple of months Warsaw and then go meet her in Lagos. Then we got married in 2014. And then I relocated to Nigeria briefly to Lagos towards the end of 2014. And then we both moved to the UK in January 2015 and have been living here since. So that was the story of how we met. So we met thanks to an article in the UK Guardian, she living in Lagos, me living in Warsaw, and an article for a UK newspaper. So I think that's just a sign of the kind of times we live in and the digital age we live in, really.
In fact, I want to go back to your parents instead, because this is a modern age. It's curious also to know how your parents met at that time.
So how my parents met, my dad got a scholarship to go and study in Poland. I think he said at the time that he was given two choices, either to study in Brazil or in Poland. And so he picked the option of Poland then, and he went there to study in Warsaw, where he studied architecture. And my dad was later elected president of the African Students' Union. And my mom at the time was a journalist who used to work on, she used to write on cultural issues. And so it was essentially in my mom's role as a journalist that she interviewed my father as president of the African Students' Union. She was doing, an article on African students in Warsaw, and that was how they met. That was their first meeting, with her interviewing him in his role as that African Students' Union leader, and that's how they started dating. And then they eventually got married in Poland. This was 1968 Poland. So they got married in 1968 Poland. Lived there for 2 years before my dad completed his studies, and then they moved back to Nigeria in 1970.
Imagine.
And as you may know, the 1970s were a decade of real sort of, there was a lot of positive things going on in Nigeria and a lot of development, a lot of opportunities for people and, a lot of hope. And so they moved there. And my mom very fondly recalled, especially her first decade in Nigeria, that first 1970 to 1980. For a while, they lived on 2 university campuses. They lived for a while, ABU Zaria, Ahmadu Bello University Zaria on the campus there. And then they also lived in the University of Ibadan campus for a while. And she told me, it was a fantastic time. There were lecturers, professors from all over the world. It was such an interesting place to be at the time. She told me, and she was a journalist. She told me, I never met as many interesting people in my life as during that period when we were living on the campus there.
In fact, that period, University of Ibadan and University of Nsukka were the two most, really, they were very fermented with many people coming from around the world, even Abeokuta itself, because, we have a very big psychiatric hospital in Abeokuta. And there they came from everywhere, Europeans, Americans, they came to study there, even, some types of sicknesses, let's say that. So, but how come from Ibadan and Lagos you had they had a gap and come to Abeokuta? What led them to Abeokuta?
I think Abeokuta, I think I was born there. I don't think we ever lived there.
Okay.
So they were living around the time I was born. They were living in Ibadan, but because they were my mom knew the doctors well at the Sacred Heart Hospital in Abeokuta, because there used to be Polish doctors there working. So she had a good relationship with them, and so she wanted to have me there. And I think my dad was also working on some projects as an architect in Ogun State at the time. So it sort of worked out, and that's why I was born there.
I have to go and investigate, because surely your dad met mine. So because
probably
they were working on constructions. Surely, and Sacred Heart Hospital, my daddy made a lot of buildings there. When he became also a leprosary. Anyways, that's fine. Good. Good. So Remy, let's go a bit deeper into what it means to be mixed. Initially, what do you identify as exactly?
That's a good question. I would say it depends on where I am at any given time. It depends on sometimes even just my mood. I think on those two things, really. So what do I mean by that? So for instance, when I'm here in the UK, I definitely very strongly identify with the continent of Africa as a whole. I identify very strongly with the continent of Africa as a whole. Then I identify also strongly with Nigeria as a specific country. And we could also say, with the continent of Africa and with Africans generally, especially. And then I identify also with Nigeria. When I am in Nigeria, I can sometimes feel more or stronger. So when I'm in Nigeria, I identify also with Nigeria, but I also there sort of I would say, Polish side or my mom's side or the European side can also be awakened in me. How can this happen? because we can be sitting in a room discussing things, and the way cultures work, every culture develops its own matrix, its own moral matrix in which it functions. And the people who are within that specific culture, they see the world through that matrix. Only outsiders can see it from a different angle. So sometimes I may be sitting in a room with Nigerians and they're talking about something and they see something in a certain way. But I see it also from a different way. And then I feel that I'm the only one in the room really who sees this thing from a different way. And I know that the reason I see it from a different way is because of the mother I had, the Polish mother I had, the kind of things she told me when I was a child, the sort of world she opened up to me when I was a child, the kind of imagination she created in my head. That is why I see things differently. Whereas the people here are within that Nigerian culture and they're operating in the norms and imaginations of that Nigerian culture. So they don't really see the thing from the perspective I see it. So when I'm in Nigeria, that my other side, let's call it, can be awakened, and I feel a little bit different because, like I say, of that kind of perspective. So that's why I say a lot depends on where I am. So when I am in Nigeria, people there will notice that I am lighter skinned, and they will sometimes want to ask that, oh, one of your parents must be white or something, So there I am asked questions like that. When I am in a white majority society, I'm simply seen as a black person. So like when I was in Poland, I was simply seen as a black person. So nobody was asking me, oh, you look mixed or something like that. People just saw me as a black person, just, where are you from? And I'll say, oh, I'm from Nigeria. And they will say, oh, okay. And then later I may add that, oh, but my mom is also from Poland and all that. And, people would usually be surprised.
Yeah.
So this is why I think generally the mixed race experience depends very much on exactly where we are, and it depends on what the majority norm is. How do the majority of people look? If let's say you look like me, so mixed black, white, and the majority of people are white, you will generally appear to people as a black person, But if you are living in a black society and you are mixed black, white, you will appear to people as a mixed race person, To even some people, you might even appear as a person that is almost white, So really our experiences depend on the demographics of where we are specifically.
But you said many things very interesting, and I do relate really profoundly with it. And but there is especially one thing, you are talking about the issue seen on our own perspective. Okay, so when we when we are with other people, when we are in the society, okay, how people perceive us is always white or black. White, never, but white, if you are in a black country, they will perceive
whitish.
White.
Yeah.
Okay. So what is worrying me nowadays is we are in the future, because we are future. We have a lot of combination. People mix between themselves. Why is it so difficult to understand and see that there is gray? There is not always white, black. There is always gray. Why, according to you, there is this? It's very difficult for people to understand and perceive this.
I think it's because if you look at things like group ecologies that exist and group identities over the years, the kind of identities that have taken a strong hold over people over the last, let's call it 100, 150 years, it's either a racial identity and national identities. Okay. Now, this was not the case 400-500 years ago. 400-500 years ago, there was nothing like nations, So people were mixing all around. Some people would live in, Roman Empire or this empire, etc., and there were all sorts of mixes. But from 100 to 150 years ago, the idea of nations really took hold, and people started thinking of themselves as, French or English or Italian, Mexican.
Yeah.
And another identity that also took hold strongly, and this is because of, white supremacy of centuries ago. So white people brought in this idea of race, that race is an important thing, And so people started thinking of themselves in racial terms also. Yeah, I'm a white person, I'm a black person, I am this, I'm that. So once those two identities sort of really became entrenched in people's heads, then, people started seeing themselves, like I say, either you are a black person, or you are a white person, or you are Spanish, or you are Italian, or you are German, or you're one of this. So people were comfortable when they know sort of who is who, because, in our heads also, people tend to differentiate between, who are those people in my in group, who are those people in the out group, so who are the people I can trust, I can rely on, who are the people, who are the outsiders, who are the enemies.
Yeah.
So this is how, human minds have evolved over the years, and, humanity has had to deal with a lot of dangers. And so the way our brains are wired, they are wired to try and quickly differentiate, between friend or foe, who is one of us, who is not one of us. And so mixed race people in this kind of dynamic have presented a problem to monoracial groups, because, where do we place these people really? Are these people one of us or not really? Can we rely on them? Maybe not really, and groups don't like that. They like knowing who is in the tribe and who we can count on in the tribe, And so this is why I think mixed race people have had a problem. And because we were so few in number, say 50, 100 years ago, we didn't really have a choice of asserting our own identity, because really we were stuck in between the conflicts between these major monoracial groups. And the real major conflict that has been going on is between the black group and the white group, since, colonialism, etc. So for instance, for those of us who are mixed black-white, we were simply stuck in the middle of that. So you have these two huge groups, which count, well over 1 billion people each, both of them today. And then you have us there in this small number, just trying to somewhere navigate in between, So I think that is a lot. And so this is why a lot of sort of behaviors were just, imposed on us. And so we were given ultimatums, essentially. Okay, if you want us to accept you as one of us, then you must essentially dance to our tune. You must agree with everything we say. If not, then, we know you are not one of us, And so it is only now today, when there's an increasing number of us, at least especially in the Western world, and generally speaking, there is more mixing around the world, that I think mixed race people are feeling more confident to say, hang on a minute, I might support you on this. Let's say you, the black group, but I might think that the white group has a point on this or that, and I should be able to say that. You shouldn't be able to hold me to ransom just because I'm mixed and tell me that, if I want to be accepted by your group, I must dance to the tune, or else I will be marginalized or I'll be excluded, But that's only coming with numbers, because, there's strength in numbers. Once people see that, look, there's a lot of other mixed race people around, and, they're asserting their identity autonomously, that emboldens others to also do the same. So that's what I think is happening right now.
Thank you for this answer, because it's really exhaustive and really deep, because we need really to realize all these things you have been saying till now. And you talk also about race. Now, two other points I wanted to try to tackle with you. First, anyway, I want to know what is the relation about the word race in your family? I mean, your parents, did they ever talk to you about that? Did they ever show you a different way of thinking about race? One. Two, we are living in they're calling it now this woke activism, no? So the word race have become something on which you have to put fire on, and start to discuss about it. We know it's a social construct. Yeah, we know all these things. Okay. So my second question on this is, do you think that if we remove that word race from our dictionaries, because this is what they want to do, okay, will we have any type of changes, or will this take us to a better world? Let us say, ladies, a better world where all of us love ourselves, blah, 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 all those nice things.
So starting from this last question, I think if it were possible for race to disappear sort of from the equation, certain tensions would be reduced in the world, other ones would remain. Okay. Because one thing that is definitely quite common to human beings across the world is that need for some kind of group identity.
Mm-hmm.
People do need to think of themselves, and perhaps in 500 years' time, things will be different, and the human brain will be wired differently.
Mm-hmm.
But for today, for the stage of evolution we are right in, people like to feel part of a group, some kind of tribe,
Mm-hmm.
And so if you remove race from the equation, like I say, it will lessen tensions on the racial angle. Let's just imagine a hypothetical world like that.
Yeah.
But there will still be conflicts, other group conflicts based on other identities. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it will be nations, for instance. So, okay, maybe now people start thinking of themselves only in terms of nations. Yeah. Oh, we are British, we are French, we are Nigerian, etc. There are still ethnic groups around. We are Igbo, we are Yoruba, we are this, we are that. There are still people who think of themselves in religious identity terms.
Yeah.
I'm a Muslim, I'm a Christian, and this and that. And there's people who have some other group terms they think of themselves in. But people do have that need to feel part of a tribe. It makes them feel safer on some kind of subconscious level.
Yeah.
So to answer your question, if race was to be removed from dictionary and people were to forget about it, let's say theoretically, were to look at each other and not see race, then yes, it would definitely remove that problem of the racial conflicts. And we will simply now be left with other conflicts that exist and be able to manage them. That's one. Would that be possible? As the way things are going, definitely not. As you say, we live in a world of social media and there's a lot of talk about race. And when people talk about something a lot, they make that thing important. Okay. And so people think of themselves in those terms. And because there is so much talk about race, and I don't see that talk disappearing, it is going to remain important for the foreseeable future.
Yeah.
Again, 300-400 years time, who knows? But for the foreseeable future, it is going to remain important. So that's what I would say on that. With regards to whether my mom talked to me about race, it's interesting that you speak about that. Not so much definitely about race. I mean, she would tell me about how it was in Poland then when she was dating my dad, that of course she would tell me that, that a lot of Poles were, very racist, that, people would call them names on the streets, imagine, walking the streets of Poland in 1960s and interracial couple, it's even incredible to imagine. So she said, of course, people would say some mean things, and had a sort of, there was a lot of xenophobic and sort of thinking within Polish people. So she'd tell me that that I think was, sort of pretty much it. I think me, she sort of simply saw as her son, as her child. So I don't think she sort of thought of me in any kind of racial terms. We never really discussed the mixed race thing, really. Because in Nigeria also, when I was growing up then, it wasn't such a thing to talk about mixed race identity. People say, okay, yes, your dad is Nigerian, your mother is white, so some people will even call you an Oyibo, that's a white person in Nigeria. But that was pretty much it. It wasn't a big issue to be discussed. So I didn't really think, honestly speaking, when I was in Nigeria, sort of my identity in those racial terms. Again, like I say, what is important in people's lives are the things that are talked about. And what was talked about in Nigeria when I was growing up was certainly not race. What was talked about was, money, class, things like that.
Till today.
Even today, exactly. So when I was thinking about myself in Nigeria, I wasn't thinking about myself in terms of being mixed race. I was thinking about myself in terms of, what's our socioeconomic status? I wish we could be rich, etc., etc. That's how I was thinking. And so again, it comes back to like what I said, that it's what people talk about that make things socially relevant or not. And here in the West today, I don't know how it is in Italy, but especially in the UK and the US, in those two Anglo countries, there is a lot of talk around race. And so, this makes it very important today.
Yeah. No, I was asking you this because in my own experience instead, I had the opportunity, my daddy was very worried when I came to Italy to start my studies. I made my primary school there in Nigeria. And then the secondary school, I came here in Italy to do that. And the first thing my dad made was taking me apart and started to make a very good conversation about race, because till that time, how you say it, in Nigeria, it wasn't something to be worried about. But he already knew that coming in Italy, okay, the question and the argument and the topic was really dangerous. So that time I was 9 years old. He just took me, still remember now, he took me in a room and started to make all this big conversation. And I was just looking at him like, why are you telling me these things? We're all the same, a small kid. What do you want to say? But my daddy was very serious and I was really upset. I have to say that many years later, I really understood what he meant. So that is why I was trying to understand if it was something only my daddy made that time, because more or less we're the same age. So, those times were, or if in other countries, other situations, things were a bit better than what they were here in Italy. So, but maybe in England, England and America, they have more experience with different, there were countries that colonized, not that Italy too colonized, but the proportion of the history between one and the other is. So I was just interested to know if this topic was touched by your parents in their education. Well, at this stage, I would like to know also, as you have experienced 3 realities of mixedness, no? I would like to know what's the main difference, if according to you, there is a difference between being mixed in Nigeria, being mixed in Poland, and being mixed in the UK.
No, there's a huge difference. So the key difference is that I blend in here in the UK.
Yeah.
So I am not a rarity here in the UK.
Good.
So even though I live in Sheffield, which is not the most multiracial city in Britain, it's not like London or Birmingham or Manchester in terms of something, but it is still way, way more racially diverse than Warsaw, where I lived before, capital of Poland, or Lagos. So basically, if I walk out on the streets today, to the city center, I will see several people who look like me. So there are several, you see mixed race people all over the place. And so when you blend in like that, one, you don't feel particularly different. People don't, stare at you or anything like that. People don't look at you as being different. So I definitely feel more comfortable, I would say. So even though it's interesting, because even though I have no family connection to the Britain whatsoever, I feel more comfortable here than I've ever felt in my life, really. I feel most comfortable here. And like I said, for the simple fact that there's many people who look like me here. And so, I can just walk about the place without feeling self-conscious or bothered by people or anything like that. So that's a huge difference, I would say.
Okay, good. Some people may ask now, especially Italians, they may ask, so are you telling us that there is not a such form of racism in England?
Of course, racism exists in England, but it to get to it, you have to dig deep, and so it's not big. So having come from a place like Poland, like I say, where people could stare at you on the streets and things like that, and you sort of you feel it everywhere. Everywhere you sort of remember that you are black or you are this, you are that. Here it's not like that. So you can go, months, I think, if somebody didn't bring up the issue of race, I could probably go for months here without thinking about it. Yeah, because nobody will. It's rare that somebody will look at me funny in a shop, or somebody will say something to me that will make me think about that. So really, I think about it, when I'm on social media and other people are talking about it. Or there might be a story in the news of, a racist incident somewhere, etc. So I, for instance, in my 8 years here in Sheffield, like I said, which is not the most multiracial something, I haven't had a racial incident. An incident that something happened, and clearly I could say that, look, this is because of the race factor. I haven't had such an incident. Now, that, of course, does not mean that racism does not exist. In England, of course, it exists. But like I said, you have to scratch deeper to find it. It's not crude. Yeah. It's not in your face. It's not the kind that happens on the continent. Yeah. You know, in Eastern Europe.
Somewhere in Italy too.
Or even exactly in places like that. It's not at that kind of level. It's not at that kind of level, you know. It's when you really dig deep and you try to scratch and you start to look at how the institutions function and, you know, what are some of the things that are not being said, you know. Also, generally, you have to know, you know, the British people are generally very good at being polite.
Yeah.
And, you know, they don't really speak their minds.
Yeah.
You know, so people are quite civil in public and things like that here. So this is generally the way they are. This is generally their nature. So generally, you won't find out too much about what they're thinking, you know.
Yeah.
They won't just tell you like that, you know. So by the time you know, and this applies also to the race issue, you know. So like I said, it's not so in your face. So you have to dig deep to find it. That's the difference between here and other and other places I've been in.
Yeah, in fact, I always have a thought about the difference between racism and ignorance. Because in Italy, it's a bit difficult. It's a bit difficult to find a connection, a real deep connection and real deep meaning of what both are different in, you know, because racism, I believe that racism is something, for instance, that happened in America and in South Africa too, with all the problem of segregation, you know, all that type of things are really tough, hard, harsh. We are not experiencing this in Italy, really, but we are experiencing a sort of I don't know whether to call it ignorance. You know, I'm trying to find all these years, I'm studying the situation to try to find exactly what is the term we can use to explain what is going on here. It's too easy to say racism because you justify everything with racism. But racism is something that really, if you felt it on your own skin, you know,
you will know it.
You know, discrimination. I always say, discrimination is different from racism. There are two, let us say, there are two aspects that have something in common, of course, but one is something really humanly awful, okay? Not that discrimination is not awful, it's awful that too, but I think you know what I mean, no?
Yeah.
And maybe from racism, you can reverse. I mean, from discrimination, you can reverse. Maybe you can try to convince, let us say, the person you are relating with that maybe he can change his mind. With racism, you can't do that.
Yes.
You can't do that because it's something you have deep inside.
Yes.
So I have always had a problem to try to understand how to fix these two terms and try to make people understand that there is a very strict difference between both. So I'm talking about this at this stage, you know, we go even to the issue of microaggressions. How did you cope with microaggressions? Do you have ever had some type of experience? How did you react? How did you face that?
So if we're talking about the early years I was in Poland, so, you know, late 90s, etc. So those were not microaggressions, those were macroaggressions. So that was the kind of racism we are talking about. So proper, you know, in your face. People calling you names on the streets, all sorts of names and things like that.
No, the microaggressions, I mean something like, for instance, they come and touch your hair in a very
yes, I know. I just started sort of, you know, with that.
Good.
So it was first that kind.
Yeah.
Then sort of later on, you know, when, you know, Poland joined the EU in 2004 and people started traveling a bit more and, you know, mixing a bit more. And there were also a bit more, you know, people of color in the country. So, you know, things improved from that kind of crude macroaggression into these kinds of things you're talking about. And, you know, they will always come down to, you know, comments very often connected to Africa specifically, not even so much to Blackness, but usually to Africa. And essentially what they boil down to was the idea that you people are underdeveloped, you people are just corrupt, you people, don't know how to organize your societies, you don't know how to build proper functioning societies. It's just chaos over there. Okay. That's really what it came down to.
Okay.
And so the comments that would be around that kind of area, explicitly or implicitly. And those are things that are very difficult to deal with, really. And so you try to sort of defend, so to speak, the tribe you're associated with, and you just do the best you can. But a lot of the things I would say were connected with that more than because, like you say, certain European countries like Poland and Italy don't have themselves a history of slavery, of mass slavery, organizing mass slavery, or organizing apartheid systems, or organizing sort of systematic racism or colonialism.
Yeah.
So there it works a little bit differently from the way it works like in the US or the UK, where there's they had these racial hierarchies, and and people were in fixed groups. So there it's more like people have if we're talking about Polish people, so obviously one divide they have is insider outsider. So who is Polish and who is not Polish? So that's one divide they have. Then apart from that, the people who are not Polish, they now look at you based on, okay, you're not Polish, so where are you from? So are you from a tribe that we respect and admire or not? So, and then of course the race comes into it also. So if you are not Polish, but you are from, let's say, Western Europe, or you're from America, or you're from Canada, or you're from Japan or South Korea, so successful places, then we respect you because your country is developed. You're from a developed nation, you're from a developed tribe.
Yeah.
So they treat those kind of people with respect. If you are an outsider, but you are from a poor country, a country that they see as not very developed, not very not worthy of respect, then they treat you based on that. So the race factor is definitely there. They definitely generally have the belief that white people are generally the superior civilization, for sure. Generally in Polish people, that belief is there at a basic level. Yeah, it's not very deep. They don't think about it very much, but they definitely assume that to be the case. Yeah, they generally assume that white people are, broadly speaking, the the best civilization, the most civilized people, etc.
Yeah.
And then they treat others based on how they feel, how well your group is doing, and how well your nation is doing, and how developed they feel your nation is, etc. And they generally definitely place Black people at the bottom of that ladder, of that hierarchy of development, etc. And that's that's simply the reality. And there is no political correctness. It's not like in the West. It's not like in the UK or the US where people will not want to say certain things because they don't want to offend you. So there people will they don't care really. They don't have lots of people of color living there. So they're not worried about your reaction to anything really. They will just tell you what they think. So it can be quite unpleasant, but it can also be educative.
Yeah.
Because you learn really, okay, so this is how these people see us really, Here it's more difficult to know that because here the people pretend, like I say, the white British people, they won't tell you exactly what they think. But they probably don't think very differently from, say, the Polish people.
Yeah.
The only difference is that they won't tell you that to your face.
Yeah.
So like I said, Poland sometimes was a brutal experience, but it was an educative experience.
I do agree. Here in Italy, we have, even here they are polite in a certain way, but maybe they are more. How can we say? When someone goes undercover, he comes with a smiling face, beautiful face, happy. They will say, "Oh, you look so exotic," thinking that it's going to make a very nice compliment. Okay, I take it as a compliment because I imagine myself like a pawpaw hanging from the tree. So I laugh on it, but it's even I don't know if it's the case even to stay there and open a discussion about that because it's like open the vase of Pandora, so let us just
to tell you, so if you're talking about microaggressions like that, so I generally tend to boil it down to the intentions I read behind it.
Mm-hmm.
So I know there are people now today who say, oh, you know, the intentions are not important. People shouldn't say certain things.
Yeah.
And okay, fine, fair enough. I get that also.
Okay.
But in my own, the way I personally as a human, I'm not advocating others do this, but the way I personally as a human being react in these situations, I just try to read the intention.
Yeah.
And if I read that the intention is not bad,
Mm-hmm.
that the intention is not to put me down, or the intention is not to try and suggest I'm a worse kind of person, or if I generally, you know, simply put, if I read that the intention is not bad, it doesn't really bother me, you know. I would just, you know, probably, you know, laugh, or like I said, it won't really bother me.
Yeah.
If I read that the intention is not bad. But if I read that the intention is bad, you know, or comes from a place of trying to express a superiority, or to put me in an inferior place, then of course I will react negatively.
Yeah.
Then I'll react negatively.
Yeah.
So for me, a lot of these things comes to reading, trying to read what's the intention here? Where is this person coming from?
Yeah.
You know, if they're not coming from a bad place, me personally, you know, it doesn't bother me. You know, I'm willing to let it go. Of course, it depends what, because sometimes people can say some very stupid things, even not from a bad place, but it's definitely worth telling them, you know, you shouldn't be saying things like that.
Yeah.
So for just to give you one example. So sometimes when I'm teaching students in class, they can use the term third world, that, oh, you know, because in the third world, this is how things work, etc. And I know very often, sometimes even brown students or black students use that. It's not even just white students. So sometimes even brown students, the ones who were brought up here, you know, the ones who were brought up here, they will say something like, oh, you know, in the third world, etc. And so I usually try to correct them and say, you know, that term is not something that people will be happy with you using. You can use, you know, a developing world or global south or something like that. Don't use that term. It's better you don't use that term third world. And they'll say, okay, oh, you know, I didn't think about it, sorry, etc. So of course, things like that, you know, I will correct them. I won't just smile and just let it go, you know. And so I will correct them, but I won't necessarily take it to heart, you know, or it's not something I'll be, you know, chewing over and getting angry over or upset over. You know, I know there are certain simply terms that are used out there, and it's worth correcting people. But for me, it's not everything that's worth, you know, getting angry over and upset over.
Of course.
The dangerous people in this world are the people who have bad intentions.
Yeah. Yeah. And we're already trained to understand this type of level. So before talking about your book, that's what I want to get into now. I just wanted to make the last consideration about us as mixed people, because this is a very important issue for me, especially. What are your considerations about, let us call them the various dilemmas of multiracial identity, starting from the tragic mulatto, the Jezebel narratives, the fact that they always consider us in a depressive mood because we are in confusion, we don't know what is our roots, our identities, and blah, blah, blah. What do you think about all these things?
You know, I think it's very individual. And I think mixed race, obviously there is a certain extra layer of complication that comes with being mixed race when on the identity issue front. So obviously, if you are born to a Nigerian father and a Nigerian mother, you are a Nigerian in Nigeria, you are a Nigerian in Scotland, you are a Nigerian in Brazil. If you are born to a white Scottish father and mother, you are white Scottish in Scotland, in Brazil, in India, anywhere in the world. There's no ambiguity there. So that issue is settled. It's not an issue you have to think about or be concerned about. You know, there's a tribe you are born into. That tribe recognizes you as a full member of that tribe, and that's it. You know. And then you face other complications in your life. But obviously, if you are born mixed race, there is always that, you know, ambiguity there. Of okay, is this person really more like this or really more like that, or really one of us or not really one of us? So that is an extra layer of complexity that exists in people's lives. Now the question is, how will they deal with that issue? How they deal with that issue, for me, one thing I believe in strongly, and which I discovered strongly when writing my book, in which I interviewed many mixed race Britons here. One issue that's really important is the home the mixed race child grew up in, how secure they felt in that home, and how loved they felt really by their parents. And this is something that applies both to monoracial people or mixed race people. Now, if a child grows up in a home where they feel the unconditional love of both parents, whether that child is mixed race or monoracial or black or white or whatever, that child will always have a shield with which to deal with the problems of the world in the future. It is something nobody can take away from you if you've gotten it as a child. And I noticed that the people I spoke to, who, when we spoke, I could see from their background and from what they told me, that they were generally loved as children and generally felt secure at home. They are always more confident as adults. They have problems like we all have. They face challenges like we all have, but they clearly seem to have more resilience in them to face those challenges. They don't feel so down. They don't feel so anxious. They don't feel so depressed. You know, they, for lack of a better word, they are stronger. People who grew up in homes where they didn't feel that unconditional love, where there were serious problems in the home, you know, between the parents were arguing all the time or things like that, whether they are monoracial or whether they are mixed race, they will not have that kind of shield I'm talking about. Sometimes they may grow up and do fantastically as adults, but I think it's more rare than not. It's often the case that in their adult life, they will struggle because that base, that foundation, which that childhood love gives you from home, which a secure home gives you, they don't have it. And so, of course, if they happen to be mixed race, this will only complicate things further for them. And it would only make life more difficult for them. Because not only are they struggling with that, those insecurities that they got from the home being what it was, then add to that the mixed race something again, and obviously then they struggle more. So this is something I really observed in the people I spoke to. And it's not even only the case that both parents had to have been around. I think that is usually the best case if both parents were around and both parents were loving and supportive. But I also spoke to people who were mixed race and grew up with only one parent. You know, the other parent was not in the picture. But that one parent they grew up with was so supportive, so loving, was able to build a safe home for them in which they felt safe. I could also see that these people as adults, as mixed race adults, were able to cope with life much easier than other people. So a lot really comes down to this, because when we talk about the mixed race thing, we talk about it as if, you know, the mixed race factor is the key factor in that person's life when they're talking about identity and their place in the world, etc. No, it's not the key factor. This is what my experience has told me and what I've gotten from playing to people. It is a factor, definitely. But the key factor really is the dynamics of the home they grew up in as a child. You know? So that's what, and that's something I would say that I observe very strongly.
This is a very good observation, even for the new parents that are growing up mixed people nowadays. They have to really, your words are very precious. And I feel they should rewind back now the video and listen again what you have been saying till now, because it's really, really, really very important. So finally, we're on your very beautiful, illuminating, and I don't know what word to use again, your book, Biracial Britain. I felt very related because what unites all of us is what unites everyone, right? So everyone passes a very huge time of his life, he or her life, navigating the tensions now between how society sees us and how we see ourselves. So this book you wrote, I loved it for two great reasons. First of all, because you interviewed a lot of people, and each of them gave their own experience of being mixed. And what I liked is that you made a short commentary, let's say, by you offered us, you enlarged the concept, no? And show it with your own personal experiences, and you compare them with your own background. This is the very rich point, let us say, in this book, because I've read a lot of books about biracial and so on. Secondly, I love the fact that you didn't focus, because when you say biracial, everybody immediately go and think about black and white, no?
Yes.
You said here in this book, you made a very nice combination, mixing really what the world is, because we can be black and white, we can be black and Asian, we can be white and Arab, you know, many type of mixtures. So I would like to ask you, as you are the father of this book, why did you write it? Why did you write Biracial Britain? And what is the message, the real deep message you want to give with this book?
So I wrote it because the mixed race identity was something I've been thinking of, off and on about.
Yeah.
Because when I came to the UK here, I saw that race is a big issue here, and identity is a big issue. But I didn't like the fact that I observed that race is often discussed in the proverbial black and white terms here.
Yeah.
So, either or, you are in this camp or you are in that camp. And I sort of felt always that this probably is not the way a lot of mixed race people see it. At least this is not the way I see it. Things are not simply black and white, so to speak. There's a lot of gray, like you say, in the middle. And I saw that gray, is missing in sort of in the general debate here. So I wanted to bring that out and show that. I also wanted to show how this works for people on an individual basis. Because very often, when we talk about race today, it's in very big picture terms, all black people this, white people are like that, etc. We're talking about groups of over 1 billion people. There's 1.3 billion black people in this world. There's around 1 billion white people in this world. And we're making statements like white people this, white people that, and black people this, black people that. These are nonsensical statements, obviously.
Yeah.
Because if you boil it down, it comes down to the individual, and as I wrote in the book, for the individual, the small picture is the big picture. What matters to me are my everyday interactions here in Sheffield, and the people I meet and how they treat me, and the University of York where I work, the people I meet there in York and how they treat me. And for you, it will be the people you interact with on a daily basis. And for a mixed race person or black person living in Stockholm in Sweden, it will be the people they interact with on an everyday basis. And so I also wanted to get that individual perspective out there, which I felt was really lacking. And so a key, definitely, a thing I wanted to get out of the book was that really, while there are, of course, certain, big picture factors that exist out there, there's no use denying them, like the fact that there is generally such a thing as, racism and a white supremacy complex and all that. This exists. This is a big picture reality that exists. However, people experience identity and race individually. And a lot, like I say, has to do with the home they were brought up in, the street they grew up in, the neighborhood they grew up in, their socioeconomic circumstances growing up, their interactions with the world, and sometimes even just sheer luck, just the people they happen to come across in their lives. Some people, for some reason, seem to come across people who are generally good and generally treat them well, and they have a generally much more positive outlook on the world. And some people, for some reason, seem to have often come across people who didn't treat them well or who were negative, and they generally have a much more negative view of the world, and so it's really, really, really individual, much more than we would know looking at, just reading headlines and reading, general articles saying, like I said, nonsense statements like, oh, white people are like this and black people are like that. So these are the key things that I really wanted to get. I also wanted to get at the fact that to tell the mixed race story chronologically.
Yeah.
So the oldest person I interviewed for the book was 74.
Yeah.
So this was somebody who was born, just at the end of the Second World War, and grew up in 1950s, 1960s Britain. So a completely different experience growing up mixed race then. Nobody was even talking about mixed race like she told me. I remember it was just, you were black and that was it. Simply in her case, she was mixed black, white. And so I wanted to, show the stories of people from that generation up till, the youngest person I spoke to was 6, who I spoke to in front of her mother, of course, with her mother's guidance. But I spoke to a lot of people who are, 18, 19, 20, that age. And to show, so that's a completely different experience growing up mixed race.
Yeah.
So I also wanted to show that sort of, that story, how things have evolved, And I also, as you rightly point out, wanted to show that, mixed race is not just mixed black and white, as is the focus. So actually here in the UK, if you look at the 100% of mixed race people, roughly half are mixed black and white. So that is the biggest group. But then 40%, something like that. And then there's another big group, which is mixed Asian white, which is almost never talked about.
Yeah.
And then there's people who have a mix with no white person, no white parent.
Yeah.
So, the child of an Indian and a Jamaican.
Yeah.
Or of a Lebanese mother and from somewhere else. And that is a whole group of mixed race that nobody even talks about, And that's because like I told you, the key conflict, racial conflict, is between black and white.
Yeah, exactly.
And so that's why the focus is on that always. When people talk about race, they are thinking most people are thinking black and white, the black and white issue,
Yeah.
And those mixed people they focus on. Mixed Asian white, almost nobody talks about. And those who are mixed with no white parent in the background, people don't even think of them as mixed race, but they are really.
Yeah. To extend the thing a bit, let us say, in a explosive way, it can be mixed also, Scottish and English, really, no? They can be considered.
That's mixed ethnicity, definitely. So, a lot depends on, our definitions here of race, of ethnicity, etc.
Yes.
So definitely, if you talk about ethnicity, then yes, definitely mixed Scottish or, mixed, So the question is, do we look at, for instance, there's a lot of Polish people who live here in the UK.
Yeah.
So it's the biggest non-British nationality living in the UK is Polish. Yeah, so there's close to 1 million Polish people here. So the question is, do we see them primarily as white people simply, and then we group them with the white British, or do we see them actually as Polish people who are white, but actually could be quite different culturally from the white British people? Yeah. So then you bring in the ethnicity something, and they definitely, on some level, if you speak to a Polish person, they will point you definitely to many cultural differences which they have.
Yeah.
Compared to the white British, they don't see themselves as simply white.
Of course.
Or like that. They will tell you that, look, we are quite different from these people in many things. Italians, there's a big population of Italians living here.
Yeah.
I was surprised to find out that of the EU citizens here, Italians are the third biggest group.
Yeah.
Here in the UK. So Polish are first, then Romanians. There's Polish, Romanians, and then it's Italians. I was quite surprised.
Yeah. I lived a lot in Ireland, and in Ireland was the same.
You see,
and we had Polish were really the first. Then secondly were Italians in Ireland. So yes,
exactly. You see, so I'm sure the Italians will tell you there are many differences between them and white British people, or white Scottish people. So definitely, and it's a good point you make, because really a lot of these issues that arise really arise from cultural differences.
Yeah,
not the racial differences per se.
Exactly.
The race is what we talk about, but a lot of the confusion that comes and the tensions come from cultural differences, which really means that Group X believes that this is the way things should be done. Group Y says that's not how we see it. We think that things should be done this way. Because that's what culture is, really. If we talk about culture, what is culture? Culture, every a society develops its own culture that gives you a prescription of what you should do and what you shouldn't do. How the world should work and how it shouldn't work. And then people are taught that as kids, and then they come out and say, oh, but this is the way things should be. And somebody brought up in another culture says, no, that's not the way things should be. Things should be like this, And a lot of these tensions which comes are really based on those cultural differences, But because race is so visible, then we think, oh, this is really about race, But it's not really about race. It's about the ideas people have in their heads. About how things should work.
This is one of the biggest challenge I have and the great criticism I used to have, because I always say Métissage is for multicultural, multiracial. I always try to make the difference, and multi-ethnical. There are three things that are different, but I always have criticism especially because I say multiracial, and multiracial should not exist. But what it should and what it is, they are two different worlds.
Of course.
that is what I'm trying to make people understand. And good. Remi, you just the last thing, and the thing I loved too on your book. I remember you interviewed a young guy. I think his name was Daniel, something like that. Okay. And I loved what he said. He said that the days of racial purity is over. He said something. Whether it is black, whether it's white, whether it's Asian, it is over. And he said that his generation won't accept absolutely the idea to fix racial and identity boundaries. Or neither even he couldn't, his generation couldn't accept people imposing on them who they are allowed to feel like. So I wanted to know, finally, do you agree with him? And what message would you like to give this new mixed generation?
Yes, I definitely agree with him because of the incredible amount of mixing that is going on now in that younger generation, both in terms of interracial relationships and marriages, but also in terms of friendships, in terms of friendships and things like that. So right now, people are growing up. These 20-year-olds today, they have black friends and white friends and Asian friends and all sorts of people in their friendship groups. It's not like it used to be 30, 40 years ago. So on one level, there's more interracial marriages, relationships, etc. And on the other level, people are simply mixing with people from other groups at a very close personal level, know. And so that also creates very different kind of mindset and worldviews. So I think that is definitely incredibly positive. I think I tend to look at the world from the sort of much longer historical perspective, not just comparing to where we were 20 years ago or 30 years ago, but comparing to where we were 300 or 400 years ago. And if you look at the evolution of mankind and history, where it's taken us, for me, there is no doubt we live in a much more humane and civilized world today than we did just 200 years ago, not to speak of 500 years ago, the kind of things our ancestors had to deal with, And so we are clearly moving in a more positive direction. Even a lot of these tensions which we talk about today, which do exist on social media, etc., a lot of it really, and a lot of it can be toxic, there's no doubt about that, but it's still in the sphere of words.
Really,
it's not people going out committing genocide. Let's not forget that, we are living, if we're talking about Europe, we're living in a continent where 80 years ago, millions of people were slaughtered in concentration camps. Just because they were from a particular group. That was the reality. Just 80 years ago on this same continent we are living in. That was the reality.
And maybe nowadays too, because in some Arab countries, it's happening the same thing as what at least I see some newspapers are making.
There's definitely bad things still going on. And of course, there's all sorts of, wars and conflicts. But I think, that level of sort of racial hatred, that, like I told you, people were ready to kill millions of people just because they were from a group X or group Y. I don't think we have that anymore. At that kind of scale, you know. And so if we look at that and where we are today, and we are still, you know, as long as it's just arguments on social media and, you know, this about that and this about that, you know, that means we are still moving in a civilized direction because at least we are discussing, even if we're arguing, you know. So as long as it stays at that, you know, then we're still moving in a positive direction. And so I definitely believe that, you know, there are going to be significant conflicts. And when I say conflicts, I don't mean violent conflicts, physical conflict, but conflicts of these arguments and this debate. They're going to be significant ones in the Western world, especially because of the fact that it's changing demographically, especially countries like Britain and America, which are increasing numbers of non-white in their population. There's going to be some serious discussions, and there's going to be some serious arguments. That's for sure. But I think broadly speaking, we are moving in a direction in which in 50 or 100 years' time, you know, our children and grandchildren will, I think, still be living in a more civilized world than the one we were born in. Because even if we think about the world we were born in, sort of 20th century world, I think the world today is still better off. And people are generally treated, and, you know, there's many caveats could be given to this, of course. There's many buts there, I know. But broadly speaking, if we're focusing on the racial issue, I think it's clear for me that we're in a better place today than we were 50 years ago.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And so as also because a lot of the issues when it comes to race were driven by that, you know, white racism kind of thing. And now, you know, that white population is declining proportionally to the rest of the world. So that is not really sustainable. Even from their perspective, let's say, it's not really sustainable anymore because the world is getting so much, you know, blacker and browner, simply put. And so that dynamic also will mean that relations between racial groups have to be more civilized in order for everyone to survive. Because if not, then it's just, you know, it will just be chaos, and we can all just, you know, slaughter ourselves, basically. That's the alternative. So that is not a viable alternative. And so in order just to survive, you know, if from the white side too, they also are going to have to make compromises and rethink a lot of the ways they do things, you know, and so will we. And so for survival, we are going to be forced to try and create some more kind of harmony.
It's true. It's true. So, Remi, I would tell, now it's Christmas time. So I would like to tell our followers, if you have to find a very good gift for your friends, biracial friends, or even people that are just hanging around with biracial people, you have to buy his book because it's so interesting and so illuminating. Remember, The Britain Birth Biracial by Remi Adekoya. So, Remi, it has been a great pleasure to have you, to have with you a deep conversation. And I do really appreciate, especially the willing that at least both of us for now, but many people around are trying to change how society perceives us and how and try to give, let us say, inspiration to make the good part, or to enter inside the good part. So I want to really thank you. I want to renovate my gratitude, and I wish to have you again here as a special guest on Hand Us Over the Mic. And thank you for being with us. And I want to thank even all the people that are listening to us and have stayed with us for all this time. So hope
thank you very much.
See you again. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Have a nice Christmas.
Same to you and to your wife, your family, everybody.
Okay.
Thank you, Remi. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. Bye-bye.